For the first time after the Islamic Revolution, Iran was able to enter the Space Club. The Soviets sent the world's first satellite into space in 1957. They pioneered it. A year later, the Americans followed suit. The French did it in 1965, Japan and China in 1970, Britain in 1971, India in 1980, and Israel in 1988. Iran became the 9th country to launch a satellite into the Earth's orbit, but that was a satellite built in partnership with foreign scientists. A few months after that launch, Iran embarked on building a satellite independently, and eventually on the morning of February 3, 2009, the country launched its first domestically built satellite, Omid, into orbit, while celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. NASA verified the successful launching of Omid. With that, for the first time in its history, Iran entered the club of now 9 countries that possess space technology. Prior to the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, the country's political system had never been put to the vote. The constitution in the Constitutional Revolution era and the shape of the constitutional government was not written by the people's representatives. Rather, they were written by a number of largely West-leaning political elite at the time, who did so on behalf of their like-minded peers. And after it was drafted, the Constitution was never put to the vote. But after the revolution, for the first time in Iranian history, in a matter of 1 year, that's in 1979, 3 separate elections were held. For the first time, the shape of the political system, the MPs who would draft the Constitution, and also the final draft of the Constitution were put to popular votes. Also, many of the country's governing bodies were put up for election for the first time in Iran's millennia-old history. The most powerful person in the country, whose position had been hereditary up to that point, was now to be indirectly elected by popular vote, and the head of the country's executive branch was to be elected by direct popular vote. Iran's first Olympic competition was recorded in 1900 during the Qajar era, when an Iranian saber fencing athlete competed in the Paris Olympics. Since then, Iran has recorded 17 Olympic competitions, of which 8 have taken place after the revolution. Before the revolution, the highest number of medals won by Iranian athletes at the Olympics was 7 at the very most. But Iranian athletes brought home the highest number of medals yet in 2012 from London. For the first time, the Islamic Republic of Iran's team of 53 athletes was able to bring back 5 gold, 6 silver, and 2 bronze medals and win 15th place among other countries and number 11 in the Men's World Championship. This was the first time the Iranian team of athletes succeeded in winning a total of 13 medals and set a new record in the country's athletic history. During the Pahlavi era, Iran had no submarines. The Shah, who bought all kinds of weaponry, was yet to purchase a sub. But in 1976, he bought Iran's first submarine, a 20-year-old American vessel named the Shark, which had been decommissioned by the U.S. Navy. When moved to Iran, the Americans were in charge of refitting it. In 2006, Iranian experts built the Ghadir-class submarine specifically for operations in the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. Today, in terms of the number of submarines and underwater offensive capability, Iran is the #1 power in the region and in the Islamic world, and number 5 internationally after North Korea, the United States, China, and Russia. IVF is a process of fertilization. In situations where fertilization is a problem, it's possible to create a womb-like environment outside the mother's womb where sperm cells and egg cells are combined in a laboratory dish. Between 2 and 6 days later, the combination is injected into the mother's womb. In 1973, Australia succeeded in completing this complex operation for the first time. In 1988, and for the first time after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, Dr. Abu Taleb Saremi published his research on IVF. 2 years later, in 1990, the first IVF birth was recorded in Yazd. and a year after that, a pair of IVF twins were born in Tehran. By the beginning of the 1990s, Iran had acquired the science for IVF, short for in vitro fertilization. Old Iran's neighbors, such as the Ottoman Empire and some of the sultans of the subcontinent, built the first missiles in the region. But the Qajar and Pahlavi monarchs did not possess the capability for missile development. An Iranian attempt for building missiles during the Pahlavi era, which later became known as Project Flower, was a joint military project with Israel. Despite the hefty costs, Project Flower did not get anywhere. After the revolution, as a result of the efforts made by Hassan Tehrani Moghadam, Iran joined the world's missile manufacturers club for the first time. The world's top 5 missile powers are Russia, the United States, China, France, and England, countries with missiles that can reach any target anywhere in the world. In 2015, Iran test-fired its intercontinental ballistic missile. Named Imad, this ICBM can travel 2,500 kilometers and can easily hit targets from Russia to Eastern Europe, west of Asia, much of India, and northwestern Africa. South African cardiac surgeon Christian Bernard performed the world's first human-to-human heart transplant on December 3, 1967. He transplanted the heart of Denise Darvall, who had just died in a car crash, into the chest of his 54-year-old patient. 3 days later, the world's second heart transplant was performed in New York. A year later, the next heart transplant was performed also in the United States. After that, heart transplants started to be done across the world. In Iran, the first such transplant took place in the years after the Islamic Revolution. 5 years after the war, on April 1993, at Tehran's Dr. Shariati Hospital, popularly known as the Heart Hospital, Dr. Mohammad Hossein Mandagar and his colleagues successfully performed the country's first heart transplant. Since then, Iran has been among the world's 10 leading countries in cardiac transplants. 15,000 heart transplants are performed in Iran every year. The country is also home to 80 organ transplantation centers. Wushu, or Chinese Kung Fu, is a blend of Chinese martial arts with Eastern philosophical backgrounds. Competitive Wushu is composed of 2 disciplines, Sanda, which means sparring, and Taolu, a series of predetermined movements combined so they can be practiced as a continuous set of movements. In 1991, Iran participated in Wushu competitions for the first time and caught up with the Chinese, who are the founders of the sport. World Wushu Championships are held every 2 years and every time in a different country. With 35 gold, 19 silver, and 20 bronze medals, Iran ranks second in the world after China. Finally, in the 2017 World Wushu Championships held in the Russian city of Kazan, Iran became the only country in the Sanda discipline to defeat the Chinese, who had won every one of the 13 championships up to that year, setting a new record in the history of the sport. With 7 gold and 1 silver medal, Iranian Sanda practitioners came first place in the world, replacing the previous ranking with China's.
Martial sports and martial arts are centuries-old sports and are rooted in Eastern nations' ancient traditions. Before the revolution in Iran, martial arts weren't paid much heed. But after the revolution, different martial arts emerged and expanded. In terms of its global ranking, Iran occupies 7th place after Russia, China, France, Japan, Ukraine, and Italy. The most successful martial arts in this new era has been Taekwondo. In the 2000 Olympics, prominent Taekwondo practitioner Hadi Sai was able to win a bronze medal, marking the first Olympic medal for one martial art for the very first time. Also in 2004, Sai was able to win an Olympic gold medal, along with Yusuf Karami, who snatched a bronze medal in the same tournament. In the 2009 Olympics that took place in the Chinese capital Beijing, Sai won another gold medal for the Iranian athletic team. His name was recorded at the top of Iran's multiple medalists list, followed by Hossein Rezazadeh and Gholam Reza Takhti.
Peaceful nuclear activity in Iran began in 1957. The Americans would sell Iran enriched uranium. The friendly relations between Iran and the United States meant more and more imported uranium for Iran, and not in its raw form, rather enriched and ready to use. As a result, Iran lacked the technology to enrich uranium on its own. After the revolution, Iranian officials decided the country had to become self-sufficient in the nuclear industry. The search for uranium resources finally bore fruit in 1989. It was declared that the Saghad region of Yazd held more than 3,000 tons of uranium. In 1994, uranium mining at the Saghad site began, and eventually in 2009, the mine became operational. This would be Iran's first operational uranium ore mine. Since then, the Islamic Republic of Iran hasn't had to import uranium. To take out submarines, naval forces around the world use cigar-shaped, self-propelled underwater missiles called torpedoes. Because of the underwater friction, torpedoes can travel on average at 25 to 30 meters per second. The number of countries that make torpedoes is small. The world's torpedo-making club has no more than 11 members, namely the US, Russia, China, the UK, France, India, South Korea, Germany, Japan, Italy, and Sweden. But since 2006, the club has added a new member. For the first time in its history, Iran succeeded in making and test-firing its own supercavitation torpedo named Hoot. Iranian engineers came up with a unique design for the torpedo. As it propels, it creates bubbles around itself as it were moving in the air. And that gives it a speed 4 times that of the other models, making it the world's fastest torpedo. Revolution, genetic science generation was non-existent in Iran. On May 29, 1991, Dr. Saeed Kazemi Ashtiani established Royan Institute. Royan's #1 mission was stem cells, which are undifferentiated cells that can be turned into certain types of cells by means of genetic engineering. One of the most important sources of such cells is the umbilical cord blood of a fetus. The world's first umbilical cord blood bank was established in France in 1989. Other developed countries wouldn't discard the umbilical cords. Rather, they would preserve them for the stem cells they contained. Finally, Iranian scientists started the country's first umbilical cord blood bank in 2005. Today, 11,000 Iranians apply for umbilical cord blood storage every year. According to the 2015 statistics, there are 134 cord blood banks in the world, holding a total of 780,000 samples. Of those samples, Iran accounts for 55,000. A limited number of countries have controlled the fighter jet industry since World War II. The United States, Russia, the UK, France, and Sweden. Prior to the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran would buy all its fighter jets. In that era, there were no plans for building fighter jets domestically, and maintenance of the imported ones was impossible without American engineers. The making of a domestically built fighter jet is a complex industry, and countries who don't have the technology cannot acquire it easily. But after years of testing and several prototypes, Iran finally unveiled its own home-built combat-capable fighter jet named Kausar for the first time in August of 2018. The Kausar, which comes in the single-seat and two-seat models and also has training applications, is equipped with new fourth-generation avionics in combination with an advanced fire control system and multipurpose radar. And that adds Iran to the first list of countries that make fighter aircraft. Only 13 countries around the world used to possess destroyers. Today, these vessels are among the most important surface vessels to navies around the world. But not all countries have the capability to build their own. Iran's Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi decided for the first time to purchase a number of destroyers from the United States. But when the 1979 Islamic Revolution happened, the U.S. refused to deliver the purchase. In 1997, leader of the Islamic Revolution issued an order to Iranian experts to build Iran's own destroyer indigenously. In 2009, and after years of hard work, Iranian experts unveiled the Jamaran, the first home-built destroyer in Iranian history. But Western powers started calling it a frigate. Letting Iran in the 13-member destroyer manufacturing club was a bitter pill to swallow. In 2012, Iran launched its second destroyer, the Jamaran 2, in the Persian Gulf. In the same year, Iran designed a new class of combat vessels named the Persian Gulf Cruiser. This time, even the Western powers wouldn't call it a frigate. In the waters of West Asia, Iran's Persian Gulf Cruiser is now the largest existing combat vessel.
You must have heard the phrase complete spinal injury. For centuries, there was no treatment for spinal injuries, and anyone who sustained an injury anywhere on the spinal cord would lose all functions below the injured area forever. Physicians have been trying to find a solution to this problem since ancient times. The stem cell solution is a new one. First the Russians and then the Chinese conducted tests to that end, but neither was very successful. In 1996, Iran became the first country to suggest that Schwann cells could be used to heal spinal cord injuries. The Schwann is a cell of the peripheral nervous system that wraps around a nerve fiber, jelly roll fashion, forming the myelin sheath. Iran started performing such treatments in the 2000s. The first tests were run on lab animals in 2002, and eventually in 2006, Iran became the first country to successfully apply this method in repairing spinal cord injuries.
The world's first cloned animal was a species of toad, cloned in 1952 by American scientists. And the first cloned fish was created by a Chinese scientist in 1963. But the most complicated animals are mammals. The first mammal to have been successfully cloned by man was a female sheep named Dolly in England. Dolly was cloned from a cell from the udder of another sheep and came into life in 1996. In West Asia, Iran was among the first countries to have started research on cloning. Turkey was Iran's most important rival, but on September 30, 2006, it was the Iranian scientists who successfully cloned the mammal.